August 3rd, 1943. Bay of Biscay, approximately 200 nautical miles northwest of Cape Finisterre. Captain Lieutenant Werner Henke stood in the cramped control room of U-515, his Type IXC submarine running on the surface under darkness, desperately attempting to recharge batteries depleted from 36 continuous hours submerged. The radar detector remained silent. No aircraft engines disturbed the night. The sea stretched black and empty in every direction. Everything seemed perfect for the surface run that would carry his boat through the most dangerous waters any U-boat commander faced. The killing ground the Allies called the Bay of Biscay. Within 2 hours, Henke and 14 of his 48 crewmen would be dead. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Victims of a technology they had never been warned existed. The sounds of their submarine breaking apart would be transmitted through devices floating on the ocean surface miles away, relayed via radio waves to American aircraft circling 2 miles overhead, listening through expendable sonar buoys that transformed the invisible ocean depths into an acoustic surveillance grid where nothing could hide. These Sonobuoys, dropped from a Navy PB-4Y-1 Liberator bomber flying at 10,000 feet, would detect U-515's machinery noise, guide the aircraft to perfect attack position, and mark not just the destruction of one submarine, but the psychological demolition of German naval confidence in their ability to transit even their own coastal waters undetected. The ocean, once Germany's highway to strategic victory, had become an Allied technological trap where submarines operated blind while their hunters possessed clear vision. The mathematics of this technological asymmetry were already being written across the Atlantic in statistics that would shatter every assumption German submariners held about their capabilities, their mission, and their chances of survival. Between 1941 and 1945, Germany would commission approximately 1,181 U-boats. Of these, 785 would be destroyed, with 632 lost at sea to enemy action. The casualty rate among U-boat crews would reach 75%, approximately 30,000 men killed from a force of 40,000, making it the highest casualty rate of any military service on either side of the conflict. The disparity wasn't just numerical. It represented a fundamental difference in how two industrial powers approached undersea warfare, technological innovation, and the integration of airborne sensors into anti-submarine operations. While Germany built sophisticated submarines with impressive endurance and firepower, America and Britain built detection systems that could hear them coming from miles away and altitudes the Germans never imagined possible. While German engineers created magnificent vessels capable of crossing the Atlantic multiple times without refueling, Allied scientists produced Sonobuoys, centimetric radar, magnetic anomaly detectors, and acoustic homing torpedoes faster than Germany could conceptualize effective countermeasures. The transformation would begin not with a single dramatic moment, but through hundreds of encounters, where German submariners gradually realized they were being hunted by forces operating from altitudes where submarine commanders believed themselves safe, tracked by technologies their intelligence services barely understood, and systematically eliminated by an integrated air-sea coordination system of incomprehensible sophistication. Korvettenkapitän Heinrich Schuch, commanding officer of U-105, would later tell Allied interrogators during his captivity in October 1944 that the moment he understood Germany had lost the Battle of the Atlantic came not from any surface engagement, but from an incident in the Bay of Biscay in July 1943. His boat had been forced to dive by aircraft radar contact while transiting on the surface at night. Standard procedure required remaining submerged for 30 minutes, before cautiously surfacing to resume the battery charge. When UN-05 came to periscope depth after the prescribed interval, Schuch observed through his optics multiple small objects floating on the surface in a precise pattern where his submarine had dived. The objects had not been there before. Aircraft engines could be heard overhead, though no radar detector alarm had sounded. The realization struck him with physical force. The aircraft had dropped listening devices that were tracking his submerged submarine's movements, guiding the hunter to his exact position. There was no escape, no countermeasure, no tactical response in German doctrine for this situation. The ocean had become transparent to an enemy operating from altitudes German anti-aircraft weapons couldn't reach, using sensors German technology couldn't detect or jam. But for thousands of German submariners, the realization came through direct, terrifying encounters with American and British anti-submarine warfare technology that transformed confident warriors into hunted prey. The story of how German U-boat crews came to understand Allied technological superiority is not one of dramatic surface battles or heroic last stands. It's a story of cumulative revelation, of gradual understanding, of technological shock so profound that it transformed the Battle of the Atlantic from a winnable campaign into a slaughter that continued only because Hitler's strategic calculus demanded U-boats tie down Allied resources, regardless of German casualties. The German U-boat force that entered the Battle of the Atlantic in September 1939 was among the world's most formidable submarine services. Germany possessed approximately 57 ocean-going U-boats at the war's outbreak, with aggressive expansion plans already underway. The type 7C submarine, which would become the workhorse of the Kriegsmarine, measured 220 feet long, displaced 769 tons surfaced, and carried 5 torpedo tubes plus one 88mm deck gun. With a crew of 44, these boats could patrol for approximately 14,000 nautical miles, remaining at sea for up to 12 weeks. The larger Type IX submarines offered even greater range and endurance, capable of operations lasting 4 months and covering distances exceeding 23,000 nautical miles. German submarine commanders trained extensively in wolf-pack tactics, night surface attacks, and evasion procedures. Many possessed years of experience. Kapitän-Leutnant Otto Kretschmer, who would become Germany's most successful U-boat ace, exemplified the skill and confidence of these early commanders. His crews were disciplined, aggressive, and confident in their boats' capabilities. They had reason for confidence. In the early years of the war, German submarines achieved spectacular successes against British shipping. During the period the British called the Happy Time, from July through October 1940, U-boats sank over 270 Allied merchant ships with minimal losses. The doctrine emphasized attacking merchant convoys at night on the surface, where submarines possessed speed advantages over escorts and could evade the primitive sonar systems available to Allied warships. German commanders learned to exploit gaps in Allied air coverage, particularly the mid-Atlantic air gap, where land-based aircraft couldn't reach. Between September 1939 and May 1943, U-boats would sink approximately 2,800 Allied merchant ships, totaling over 14.4 million gross registered tons. This strategic focus on commerce raiding, cutting Britain's supply lines to starve the island nation into submission, initially proved devastatingly effective. More importantly, German submariners believed they understood the tactical environment in which they operated. Surface radar could detect them when running on the surface, necessitating crash dives when aircraft approached. Sonar could track them when submerged, but only at relatively close ranges. The primitive ASV Mark I and Mark II radar systems used by Allied aircraft in 1941 and 1942 operated at wavelengths around 1.5 meters, which could be detected by German Metox radar warning receivers, providing U-boat commanders precious minutes of warning before aircraft attacks. The introduction of Sonobuoys in mid-1942 would shatter these assumptions completely. The first encounters with this technology occurred not with German submarines but during developmental tests. In March 1942, the United States Navy blimp K-5, cruising over waters south of New London, Connecticut, successfully detected the submarine S-20 running completely submerged using a prototype, Sonobuoy, designated the ANCRT-1. The device consisted of a battery-powered hydrophone suspended beneath a floating radio transmitter. When deployed from aircraft, the Sonobuoy would listen for submarine machinery noise, propeller cavitation, and hull vibrations. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. transmitting acoustic signals via radio to receivers aboard the aircraft circling overhead. The technology was deceptively simple in concept, but revolutionary in its implications. For the first time, aircraft could detect fully submerged submarines without visual contact, radar returns, or magnetic anomaly detection equipment. The Sonobuoy effectively extended an aircraft's sensory reach from the two-dimensional surface into the three-dimensional underwater environment, transforming airborne anti-submarine warfare from a matter of chance visual sightings into systematic acoustic surveillance. Development proceeded rapidly through 1942. By June, the Bureau of Ships ordered 1,000 Sonobuoys and 100 receivers. The Army Air Corps, recognizing the technology's potential, ordered 6,410 units in late 1942. By June 1943, the expendable radio Sonobuoy had been officially approved by the United States Navy for use on all planes and blimps engaged in anti-submarine warfare. The ANCRT-1A Sonobuoy measured approximately 3 feet long and 5 inches in diameter, small enough to be carried in quantity by patrol aircraft, yet sophisticated enough to detect submarines at ranges approaching 3 nautical miles. The device operated on one of 6 radio frequencies, allowing aircraft to deploy multiple buoys simultaneously and monitor each independently. Battery life permitted approximately 6 hours of continuous operation, more than sufficient for most patrol missions. The impact on German U-boat operations would be catastrophic, though German naval intelligence remained almost completely unaware of the technology's existence until well into 1943. For Kapitänleutnant Werner Henke and the crew of U-515, the first indication something was catastrophically wrong came at 2100 hours on August 3, 1943. His boat had been transiting the Bay of Biscay on the surface under darkness, maintaining maximum speed to minimize time exposed in the most heavily patrolled waters any U-boat faced. RAF Coastal Command and United States Navy patrol aircraft had turned the bay into what German submariners grimly called the Valley of Death, a 400-mile gauntlet where submarines were forced to surface regularly to recharge batteries while running the constant risk of air attack. U-515's METOX radar detector had remained silent throughout the evening, suggesting no aircraft equipped with search radar operated nearby. Standard doctrine called for maximum vigilance but permitted surface running when radar conditions appeared clear. Henke maintained posted lookouts, scanning the night sky for visual indications of approaching aircraft. Everything followed established procedures, perfected through dozens of previous patrols. What neither Henke nor his lookouts could detect was the Navy PB-4Y1 Liberator from Patrol Squadron 103, operating at 10,000 feet altitude approximately 5 miles away. The aircraft, equipped with the new centimetric ASV Mark III radar operating at 10 centimeter wavelength, had detected U-515's surfaced profile minutes earlier. The German METOX receiver, designed to detect longer wavelength radar signals, remained completely silent. The U-boat's crew had no warning whatsoever that they had been located, tracked, and targeted. The PB-4Y1's tactical coordinator made the decision to deploy Sonobuoys before attacking, establishing an acoustic surveillance grid that would track the submarine if it crash-dived during the engagement. 4 ANCRT-1A Sonobuoys were dropped in a rectangular pattern around U-515's position, each buoy color-coded for identification and transmitting on separate radio frequencies. The buoys entered the water, deployed automatically, and began transmitting acoustic data to the circling Liberator. The operators aboard the aircraft could hear through their headsets the distinctive sounds of U-515's diesel engines running at maximum power, the rhythmic throb of propellers pushing the boat through the surface water, even the sound of machinery operating within the hull. The submarine had become an acoustic beacon, completely unaware it was being tracked by invisible sensors floating on the ocean surface. The attack came with devastating precision. At 21:15 hours, the PB-4Y1 Liberator descended from altitude, approaching U-515 from the stern quarter, where German lookouts had the poorest visibility. The aircraft's ley light, a 2 million candle-power searchlight, mounted in the ventral turret, snapped on at a range of 1,000 yards, instantly illuminating the submarine in brilliant white light that turned night into day. Henkei's lookouts screamed warnings. The boat's anti-aircraft crews scrambled to their twin 20mm cannons, but the American aircraft had already begun its attack run, releasing 4 Mark 47 depth charges set for shallow detonation. The explosives bracketed U-515 perfectly, detonating 25 feet to port and starboard of the boat's pressure hull. The underwater shock waves were catastrophic. U-515's hull plating buckled inward. Welds failed along multiple frame sections. The forward torpedo room began flooding immediately as seawater poured through ruptured seams. Battery compartments flooded, releasing chlorine gas that forced crew members topside gasping for air. Henkei ordered the boat surfaced, recognizing his submarine was mortally wounded. As U-515 wallowed on the surface, taking on water through multiple hull breaches, the Sonobuoys continued transmitting. The acoustic sensors detected the sounds of internal flooding, bulkheads collapsing, machinery failing, and eventually the terrible sounds of men dying as the submarine broke apart. The American aircrew recorded the death of U-515 with clinical precision, the Sonobuoy transmissions providing acoustic confirmation of the kill. 14 men died in the attack and subsequent sinking. 34 survivors, including Henkei, were eventually rescued by Allied vessels and taken into captivity. During interrogation, Henkei would describe the attack with a tone of resignation rather than bitterness. The Germans had been fighting an enemy who possessed sensory capabilities they couldn't match, couldn't detect, and couldn't effectively counter. The ocean had become transparent to Allied aircraft operating at altitudes where U-boats were helpless to respond. But U-515 was merely one submarine among hundreds that would encounter Sonobuoy technology throughout 1943 and 1944. The systematic deployment of these acoustic sensors represented a fundamental shift in anti-submarine warfare that German naval intelligence struggled to comprehend even as the evidence accumulated. The Bay of Biscay campaign of 1943 provides the clearest statistical evidence of Sonobuoy effectiveness. Between April and August 1943, RAF Coastal Command's No. 19 Group, operating from bases in southwestern England, sank 26 U-boats in the bay through aircraft attack. Another 17 U-boats suffered damage severe enough to force them back to port. The killing ground stretched from Cape Finisterre in the south to the entrance of the English Channel in the north, a 400 by 120-mile gauntlet every U-boat transiting to and from French Atlantic ports had to cross. Prior to the widespread deployment of centimetric radar and Sonobuoys in early 1943, U-boats could transit the bay with reasonable confidence by running submerged during daylight and surfacing at night to recharge batteries. The Metox radar detector provided adequate warning of approaching aircraft equipped with older ASV Mark II radar systems, giving commanders time to crash dive before aircraft could attack. The introduction of 10-centimeter radar in ASV Mark III systems eliminated that warning. The addition of Sonobuoys eliminated any possibility of escape even after diving. German submariners found themselves hunted by aircraft they couldn't detect, using sensors that revealed their positions even when completely submerged. Oberleutnant zur See Hans Joachim Schwantke, commanding U-43, filed a war diary entry in December 1942 that captured the growing crisis. His boat had been transiting the Bay of Biscay on a moonless night, running surface to charge batteries, when searchlights blazed from directly overhead without any warning from the Metox detector. Depth charges bracketed his diving boat, causing severe damage that forced an emergency return to port. "We were blind," Schwantke wrote. The Metox gave no alarm. The aircraft appeared as if materialized from darkness itself. Only luck saved us. We heard the bombs falling and crash-dived with seconds to spare. Either the British have developed radar our detectors cannot sense, or they are using some other technology we do not understand. Whatever the explanation, we are being hunted by enemies we cannot detect until the moment of attack. Similar reports flooded into U-boat headquarters in Paris throughout the winter of 1942 and spring of 1943. Boats were being caught on the surface at night with no warning. Aircraft seemed to possess supernatural ability to locate submarines in conditions where visual detection should be impossible. The statistical evidence told a grim story that would become catastrophic by mid-year. In November 1942, German U-boats sank approximately 119 merchant ships, totaling 729,000 tons worldwide, losing 13 submarines. December saw 60 merchant ships totaling 330,000 tons sunk with 5 U-boats lost. By January 1943, sinkings dropped to 37 ships, while U-boat losses climbed to 7 boats. February saw 34 merchant ships sunk and 17 U-boats lost. The exchange rate, once heavily in Germany's favor, was collapsing at an accelerating pace. Admiral Karl Dönitz, promoted to Commander-in-Chief of the entire Kriegsmarine on January 30, 1943, while retaining direct control of U-boat operations, watched these numbers with growing alarm. His headquarters maintained detailed plots of every U-boat position, every convoy route, every engagement. The patterns emerging from these plots made no sense according to conventional naval warfare logic. U-boats approaching convoys in darkness were being intercepted before they could attack. Boats transiting the Bay of Biscay under cover of night were being bombed with precise accuracy. Submarines running submerged during daylight were somehow being tracked and depth-charged, despite maintaining complete acoustic silence. Allied aircraft appeared to possess supernatural ability to locate submarines in conditions where detection should be impossible. The technological explanation remained elusive through the spring of 1943. German naval intelligence knew the British and Americans had improved their radar systems, evidenced by the fact that Matox receivers no longer provided reliable warning. But radar alone couldn't explain how aircraft tracked submerged submarines, or how they maintained contact after boats crash-dived to escape. The first concrete evidence of Sonobuoy technology reached German intelligence through interrogation of Allied aircrew shot down over the Bay of Biscay in June 1943. Under questioning, a captured American radio operator mentioned deploying acoustic buoys that listened for submarine sounds and transmitted them to aircraft circling overhead. The intelligence report generated skepticism among German technical staff. The concept seemed theoretically possible, but practically implausible. Building a device small enough to be air deployable, yet sophisticated enough to detect submarines, power it for useful operational periods, and transmit acoustic data via radio at ranges approaching 10 miles, represented engineering challenges German scientists considered barely achievable. That the Americans and British had not only solved these problems, but were producing such devices in quantity seemed impossible, given the reported simplicity and low cost of the equipment. Yet the evidence continued accumulating. By August 1943, when the Bay of Biscay offensive reached its peak intensity, German submariners were reporting floating objects on the ocean surface at locations where aircraft attacks had occurred. These objects appeared small, cylindrical, and were frequently observed deployed in patterns around submarine diving positions. Some boats that escaped attack managed to surface after aircraft departed and recover these mysterious devices. Technical examination confirmed they were acoustic listening devices combined with radio transmitters, exactly as the captured American aircrewman had described. The sophistication was stunning. The ANCRT-1, a sonobuoy, weighed only 31 pounds yet incorporated a hydrophone, amplifier, radio transmitter, batteries sufficient for 6 hours operation, flotation system, and parachute deployment mechanism. The device could be dropped from altitudes up to 10,000 feet and would automatically activate upon water impact. The hydrophone descended to a depth of 24 feet, where it listened for frequencies between 300 and 5,000 Hz, the range covering most submarine machinery noise and propeller cavitation sounds. The captured sonobuoys were sent to Berlin for detailed analysis. German acoustics experts at the Kriegsmarine's Technical Research Command examined the devices with a mixture of admiration and despair. The engineering was elegant. The electronics were sophisticated yet robust enough to survive parachute deployment and ocean immersion. The tactical implications were devastating. The technical report concluded that German submarines had been operating in an environment where Allied aircraft possessed three-dimensional detection capabilities, while U-boats remained effectively blind to aerial threats. Centimetric radar detected surfaced submarines at ranges approaching 30 miles in clear conditions, often penetrating through cloud cover and darkness. Magnetic anomaly detectors, though limited to ranges of several hundred feet, could detect submerged submarines in shallow coastal waters. Sonobuoys provided acoustic detection of submerged submarines at ranges approaching 3 miles, with the ability to track target movement and maintain contact even through evasive maneuvers. The integration of these sensors created an anti-submarine warfare system that was nearly impossible to evade. An aircraft detecting a submarine on surface radar would approach to attack range. If the submarine crash-dived, the aircraft would deploy a sonobuoy pattern and continue tracking the boat underwater. If the submarine attempted to escape submerged, its movement generated noise the sonobuoys detected and transmitted to the aircraft. The aircraft could then drop additional sonobuoys ahead of the submarine's projected track, maintaining contact while calling in surface vessels or additional aircraft to coordinate an attack. There was no effective counter-tactic in German doctrine for this situation. U-boats attempting to transit the Bay of Biscay faced impossible choices. Remaining surfaced exposed them to radar detection and immediate attack. Crash diving only delayed the attack while sonobuoys tracked their submerged movements. Remaining submerged for extended periods depleted batteries and left boats with insufficient power to dive if detected after surfacing. Running submerged at slow speeds to conserve batteries merely prolonged the time spent in dangerous waters. The psychological impact on German submariners was profound. Captain Lieutenant Klaus Bargston, commanding U-521, would later describe the Bay of Biscay transit in July 1943 as the most terrifying experience of his entire war service. His boat had been hunted for 14 hours by aircraft that maintained perfect contact, despite multiple crash dives and evasive maneuvers. Every time U-521 surfaced to recharge batteries, aircraft appeared within minutes, forcing another emergency dive. The crew could hear through the hull, the sounds of engines overhead, depth charges exploding nearby, sonobuoys splashing into the water around them. The Atlantic, which German submariners had once dominated through superior tactics and aggressive spirit, had become a technological trap where courage and skill meant nothing against enemies who possessed decisive sensor advantages. Bargston successfully reached port after burning through his entire stock of emergency battery capacity, but the psychological cost was evident. His crew was exhausted, demoralized, and shaken. The confidence that had characterized German submariners early in the war had evaporated, replaced by grim understanding that they were being sent into combat against enemies they couldn't fight effectively. The statistics from the latter half of 1943 confirmed what individual commanders were experiencing. In July, U-boats sank only 37 merchant ships worldwide while losing 37 submarines. August saw 43 U-boats lost against only 25 merchant ships sunk. The exchange rate had completely reversed. Germany was losing submarines faster than new construction could replace them, while Allied merchant ship production far exceeded losses. Grand Admiral Dönitz faced a strategic crisis. On August 2, 1943, he issued orders withdrawing U-boats from North Atlantic convoy operations. The official explanation cited the need to re-equip submarines with improved weapons and defensive systems. The unstated reality was that continuing operations under current conditions would annihilate the entire U-boat force within months without achieving strategic results. The withdrawal represented an acknowledgement of defeat in the Battle of the Atlantic, though Hitler refused to accept that characterization. German propaganda emphasized that U-boats were tying down enormous Allied resources, forcing the maintenance of extensive escort forces and patrol aircraft that might otherwise support operations against occupied Europe. This was true, but missed the fundamental point. The Allies had developed technologies and tactics that made submarine operations unsustainable. The sonobuoy was merely one component of an integrated anti-submarine warfare system, but its psychological impact on German submariners was disproportionate to its technical sophistication. The knowledge that aircraft flying at 10,000 feet altitude could detect and track submarines hundreds of feet below the ocean surface created a sense of helplessness and inevitability among U-boat crews. They were fighting enemies who possessed capabilities that seemed almost magical, certainly beyond anything German technology could match in the time frame remaining before Germany's inevitable defeat. German efforts to counter Sonobuoy technology began in earnest during the autumn of 1943, but the solutions arrived too late and in insufficient quantities to affect operational outcomes. The Technical Research Command initiated multiple programs designed to reduce submarine acoustic signatures, jam or deceive sonobuoy sensors, and provide U-boats with capability to detect when they were being tracked. The first countermeasure was the schnorkel, a breathing tube that allowed submarines to run diesel engines while submerged at periscope depth. The device consisted of two tubes fastened together and hinged to the deck, one providing air intake for the engines and one exhausting fumes. When extended, the schnorkel head protruded approximately 6 feet above the water surface, far less visible on radar than a fully surfaced submarine. The concept wasn't new. The Dutch Navy had developed similar systems before the war, and Germany had captured Dutch submarines equipped with schnorkels when Holland fell in May 1940. But implementing the system across the U-boat fleet required extensive modifications to individual boats, modifications that could only be performed in shipyards already overwhelmed with repair work on battle-damaged submarines. The first schnorkel-equipped U-boats didn't enter operational service until early 1944. By then, Allied anti-submarine forces had adapted their tactics. Sonobuoys could still detect schnorkel-equipped submarines running submerged. The reduced radar signature helped boats avoid detection while transiting dangerous waters, but once located by any means, the schnorkel provided no protection against coordinated air-sea attacks. More sophisticated countermeasures focused on acoustic deception. German engineers developed the Bold device, a chemical canister that released calcium hydride when deployed from a submerged submarine. The chemical reacted with seawater to produce hydrogen bubbles that created acoustic returns, mimicking submarine machinery noise. The theory was that sonobuoys would track the decoy, while the submarine escaped in a different direction. Practical results proved disappointing. Experienced Allied acoustic operators could distinguish between submarine sounds and chemical decoys within minutes. The Bold device might provide brief confusion during the initial moments after deployment, but sustained tracking revealed the deception quickly. More importantly, deploying Bold required the submarine to slow down and maneuver to release the canister, actions that generated additional acoustic signatures easily detected by sonobuoy arrays. German scientists also attempted to develop acoustic coatings, rubber-based materials that would absorb sonar pulses and reduce the submarine's acoustic signature. Some Type XXI submarines, the revolutionary new design entering production in 1944, incorporated these coatings. But the materials were expensive, difficult to apply, and provided only modest reductions in detectability. A submarine equipped with the best acoustic coatings still generated sufficient machinery noise to be detected by sonobuoys at ranges approaching 2 miles. The most ambitious countermeasure program sought to develop sensors that would alert U-boat commanders when sonobuoys were deployed nearby. If submarines could detect sonobuoys, they might take evasive action before Allied aircraft established firm contact. The technical challenges proved insurmountable within wartime constraints. Sonobuoys were passive devices that emitted no signals until transmitting acoustic data via radio. Detecting the radio transmissions required receivers tuned to the correct frequencies and directional antennas to determine bearing. Even if such equipment could be developed and fitted to submarines, it would only confirm what commanders already knew from the presence of aircraft overhead. By the time a U-boat detected sonobuoy radio transmissions, Allied aircraft had already established contact and were coordinating attack. None of these countermeasures addressed the fundamental problem. German submarines were operating in an environment where Allied forces possessed integrated sensor systems combining radar, sonobuoys, magnetic anomaly detection, high-frequency direction finding, and signals intelligence. Individual countermeasures might defeat one sensor type, but left submarines vulnerable to others. The only effective counter to Allied anti-submarine warfare systems would have required revolutionary submarine designs capable of sustained high-speed submerged operations, eliminating the need to surface or snorkel in dangerous waters. The Type XXI submarine, with its streamlined hull design, massive battery capacity, and capability for sustained submerged operations, represented Germany's attempt to achieve this revolutionary design. These boats could cruise submerged at speeds approaching 17 knots for short periods and maintain 5 to 6 knots for extended underwater transits. They incorporated improved acoustic coatings, advanced sonar systems, and could dive to depths approaching 900 feet. In theory, Type XXI submarines could transit the Bay of Biscay completely submerged, avoiding radar detection and minimizing acoustic signature through slow, quiet running. In practice, the first Type XXI boats didn't become operational until April 1945, far too late to affect the war's outcome. Only 4 Type XXI submarines completed war patrols before Germany's surrender in May. Of these, none encountered conditions that allowed them to demonstrate their theoretical advantages over conventional U-boats. The technology that might have countered Sonobuoy effectiveness arrived after the Battle of the Atlantic had been irretrievably lost. Throughout 1944 and into 1945, U-boat operations continued despite unsustainable loss rates. Hitler's strategic logic demanded that submarines continue tying down Allied resources regardless of German casualties. Grand Admiral Dönitz, though privately acknowledging the campaign's futility, maintained public optimism and continued sending submarines into Atlantic waters where they faced overwhelming technological disadvantages. The human cost was staggering. In 1944, Germany lost 242 U-boats while sinking only 132 Allied merchant ships totaling 773,000 gross registered tons. The exchange rate had become catastrophic. Every merchant ship sunk cost Germany nearly 2 submarines lost. The crews manning these boats knew the statistics, understood the odds, yet continued sailing into combat because duty demanded it, and military discipline allowed no alternative. Oberleutnant Zur See Herbert Werner, who survived multiple patrols aboard U-230 and later wrote extensively about his experiences, described the psychological state of U-boat crews during the final year of the war. They were no longer warriors confident in their capabilities. They were victims, hunted by technological forces they couldn't fight effectively, sent into combat by commanders who knew most boats would never return. The transformation from confidence to resignation to despair paralleled the broader German experience as defeat approached. Werner recounted an incident from January 1945 when U-230 encountered Allied aircraft while transiting Norwegian coastal waters. The boat crash-dived, and within minutes the crew heard through the hull the distinctive splashing sounds of Sonobuoys entering the water around them. The acoustic operators could hear the Sonobuoys' hydrophones activating, beginning their systematic search. Werner ordered complete silence throughout the boat. All non-essential machinery shut down. The crew remained motionless at their stations, barely breathing, hoping to minimize acoustic signature. For 3 hours they crept through the depths at 2 knots, praying the Sonobuoys wouldn't detect the minimal sounds their submarine still generated. Eventually the aircraft departed, either losing contact or running low on fuel. U-230 survived that encounter, but the psychological cost was evident. The crew understood they had been hunted by technologies against which courage and skill meant nothing. Their survival was luck, not tactical superiority. The next aircraft, the next Sonobuoy pattern, the next depth charge attack might kill them, despite perfect execution of every procedure in German doctrine. They were fighting a battle already lost, continuing operations only because surrender wasn't permitted until Germany's complete collapse. The final accounting of the Battle of the Atlantic tells a story of industrial capacity and technological innovation, overwhelming tactical skill and operational courage. Germany commissioned approximately 1,181 U-boats during World War II. Of these, 785 were destroyed, with 648 lost to enemy action and the remainder scuttled, lost to accidents, or stricken from service. Only 156 U-boats survived to surrender in May 1945. Of the approximately 40,000 men who served in U-boats during the war, approximately 30,000 died, representing a 75% casualty rate. This was the highest casualty rate of any military service on either side of the conflict. These men fought with extraordinary courage and skill. But courage and skill could not overcome the fundamental technological disadvantage created by Allied sensor superiority. Aircraft accounted for approximately 245 U-boats sunk throughout the war, either through direct attack or in conjunction with surface vessels. The introduction of Sonobuoys in mid-1942 fundamentally transformed airborne anti-submarine warfare from opportunistic hunting of surfaced submarines to systematic tracking of boats both surfaced and submerged. By war's end in 1945, the United States Navy had ordered 150,000 Sonobuoys and 7,500 receivers. These devices, each costing approximately $300 to manufacture, had contributed to the destruction of the most sophisticated submarine force the world had yet seen. The disparity between cost and effect was stunning. A $300 Sonobuoy could track submarines costing millions of Reichsmarks to build and representing years of crew training. The mathematics of technological asymmetry worked decisively against Germany throughout the campaign. The psychological legacy of Sonobuoy technology extended far beyond immediate tactical effects. German submariners who survived the war carried with them profound understanding that technological superiority determined outcomes in modern warfare, regardless of courage or tactical skill. This understanding influenced post-war German naval development and broader strategic thinking about technological competition between nations. When the German Federal Navy reformed in 1956 as part of NATO's defensive structure, its submarine service incorporated lessons learned through painful defeat. Modern German submarines employed American and British sensor technologies, including sonar systems derived from wartime anti-submarine warfare research. Former U-boat commanders who joined the new service trained their crews on the importance of acoustic quieting, understanding that the ocean remained transparent to enemies possessing superior detection capabilities. The sonobuoy technology that shocked German submariners in 1943 evolved continuously through the Cold War and into modern naval operations. Passive sonobuoys became more sensitive, capable of detecting submarines at greater ranges and in noisier ocean environments. Active sonobuoys were developed, emitting sonar pulses and listening for echoes, providing ranging data in addition to bearing information. Directional sonobuoys incorporated multiple hydrophones, allowing determination of target bearing without deploying multiple buoys. Modern sonobuoys are sophisticated electronics packages incorporating digital signal processing, GPS positioning, satellite communications capability, and extended operational lifetimes. They remain fundamental tools in anti-submarine warfare, deployed from aircraft, helicopters, surface vessels, and even other submarines. The technological revolution that shocked German submariners in 1944 continues evolving, with modern submarines facing detection capabilities that would astound both Allied and German forces from World War II. But the fundamental lesson remains unchanged. Technological superiority, backed by industrial capacity, determines outcomes in modern warfare. German submariners learned this lesson through defeat. They carried it into post-war reconstruction and influenced German strategic thinking for generations. The confidence with which U-boat commanders entered the Battle of the Atlantic in 1939 transformed through bitter experience into recognition that Germany had been fighting enemies possessing decisive technological advantages. The story of German U-boat operators never expecting that sonobuoys could detect submarines from 10,000 feet altitude stands as testament to technological change in warfare. From confidence to recognition of defeat, from presumed tactical superiority to acknowledgement of systematic inferiority, the journey transformed not just individual submariners, but influenced naval development worldwide. The ocean changed hands not through surface battles, but through invisible technologies. Aircraft flying at altitudes where submarines were helpless to respond, deployed acoustic sensors that transformed underwater depths into surveillance grids where nothing could hide. The Sonobuoys floating on wave surfaces listened beneath them, transmitting data to forces that hunted with scientific precision. Kapitänleutnant Werner Henke and the thousands of German submariners who died during the war were defeated by an industrial and technological system they couldn't comprehend until too late. The 14 men who died aboard U-515 on August 3, 1943, were killed by depth charges guided to perfect accuracy by acoustic sensors. Henke never knew existed until the moment of attack. Their deaths, multiplied across hundreds of similar encounters, represented not individual tactical failures but systemic technological defeat. Those submariners who survived carried knowledge that shaped post-war Germany and influenced global naval development for decades. The ocean belonged to those who controlled the technology to master it. That lesson, learned painfully by German submariners between 1941 and 1945, remains relevant in modern naval warfare and technological competition. The sounds of submarines breaking apart, recorded by Sonobuoys floating on Atlantic waters, testified to a revolution in warfare where sensors invisible to the hunted revealed everything to the hunters. The transformation was complete by mid-1945. German U-boats had nowhere to hide, no safe harbor, no hope of survival against integrated sensor systems that detected them surfaced through radar, submerged through Sonobuoys, and at all depths through coordinated air-sea operations. The confidence with which German submariners had entered the war evaporated through accumulated encounters with technologies they couldn't match. By war's end, survivors understood viscerally that Germany's defeat had been inevitable once Allied industrial and technological superiority manifested fully. The ocean was never truly Germany's. It had only taken time for reality to assert itself. American and British sonobuoys, radar systems, acoustic torpedoes, and industrial capacity had transformed submarine warfare. German submariners, regardless of their skill or courage, were operating in an environment where enemies possessed decisive technological advantages they could neither see nor counter effectively. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.